Is this a very small portion of Mosul that Iraqi security forces have managed to infiltrate at this stage?
It is. It's on the eastern outskirts of the city, although there has been heavy shelling as well in a neighborhood on the northeastern edge of the city. But what the Iraqi army is saying that it's finding is small pockets of ISIS fighters. It says there are ISIS snipers on the roofs of buildings. The guidance that they're giving to the population is stay indoors, raise a white flag. Of course, as many as 1 million people in the city. We know about 20,000 people, more than 9,000 of them children, so far have fled Mosul and the surrounding area. But there is an expectation now, as the pace of the battle will likely slow down in what is expected to be intense urban conflict, that the battle will be complicated and made harder because of the need to avoid civilian casualties, and also that desire of civilians to want to get out of the way of the fighting, the desire of the Iraqi army to want to help them in that, and the desire, it has been very clear, of ISIS to prevent civilians leaving, even using them as human shields. There was an airstrike on a bridge in Mosul today. Witnesses saying that a convoy of ISIS vehicles were crossing over between the east and the west of the city, and the coalition saying that it targeted ISIS targets on a bridge in Mosul. But even though that the government forces are in the east of the city, there's an expectation that the west, where you talked about those militias having a flanking maneuver, trying to cut off, if you will, the back door for ISIS, that it's the west of the city that may really present the tougher challenge, where ISIS will dig in and hold ground harder and for longer. But at the moment, this really is, in essence, now they're in the city, this is where it really gets tough, Hala.
Right, of course. Can we bring that map up again to show where Iraqi security forces have managed to enter, to essentially puncture the perimeter of Mosul on the eastern flank there? Are they managing to get in and hold that territory, or what's the situation in terms of whether or not they're able to actually sort of move ISIS out of there and hold that portion of the city, and how easy or difficult is that for them to do?
Intisar and Sama are the two neighborhoods we understand on the east of the city there. The government is moving in with the intention of holding territory. It does recognize that it needs to clear strategically, street by street, and some occasions perhaps house by house. Perhaps the resistance and the number of expected suicide bombings, it's been talked about. We've seen ISIS using vehicle IED, suicide bombers, to target troops as they've been moving in. But there was an expectation that when you hit the perimeter of the city, there might be more of these types of IEDs and suicide bombings. And perhaps it's been striking that those haven't happened yet. But that's, of course, a cause for concern for the army, because they have to be sure that they move forward, that they don't allow ISIS to circle back around behind them using tunnels and that sort of network. There is a feeling for ISIS, of course, feeling the government forces coming in from the east of the city, knowing that they're being circled on the west of the city, and now also evidence emerging that civilians themselves in the city are feeling emboldened a little, because they know that the battle is now coming to them, and some civilians willing to take on ISIS. So ISIS now has that uncertainty of knowing it's not just what may come from the air or down the street towards them, but what literally may come at their backs. But this is urban fighting is the hardest for any military. All that heavy firepower, it's much harder to use.
I've got to ask you, Nick, though, we're seeing, of course, stiff resistance from ISIS fighters just in small battle zones like two neighborhoods on the eastern flank. What does that tell us about ISIS's willingness to fight? How many fighters might still be in the city at this stage?
It's not clear how many fighters may be in the city. We've heard described a movement between the east of the city and the west of the city. The army is coming from the east in strength of numbers. They're the ones that are going to go into the city. The river divides the city north to south, separating east from west. It's the western side of the city where ISIS is expected to put up stiffer resistance, because some of the neighborhoods there are more conservative Sunni neighborhoods, and understood that ISIS might find find more sympathy there. Not that there is much. All those people that have been leaving are talking about the harsh way that they've been treated by ISIS, the terrible conditions, the fact that there are so many controls put on their lives, no cigarettes, television ban, have to grow their beards, so many restrictions, rules and regulations. But it's the West where, if there is part of the population or neighborhoods where ISIS can at least feel more confident that the neighborhoods aren't going to fight against them, it's in the West. But of course, they will have to make a calculation. Do they fight and die? And we've seen them certainly willing to do that. Or will they try to run for the West and towards Syria, where they can perhaps get safety for a while?